Hi everyone, it's Adam with Milo's Restoration, and today I've got a video for you about turning old office furniture into a set of nightstands. And I think that this can be a good niche for furniture flippers because there's a ton of old furniture out there like this from offices that needs a new home. So the first thing that I'm going to do is start like any other flip. I use a mix of water and Dawn, and I'll wipe everything down. But before I did that, I decided to take out the old, the hardware, and I took out everything because I wanted to paint all the insides, everything. So I just took all the drawer slides and everything off like that, and stored them in a safe place. And try to be careful whenever you're removing these because a lot of the time they have a lot of grease or wax on them, and you don't want to get that on your furniture. So what I clean with is very dependent on the piece and how much grime, dirt, wax, or whatever residue or problems I think I'm going to run into, as well as the primer that I'm going to use. Sometimes I'll clean with alcohol because I'll use a shellac-based primer, and sometimes it's good to clean with a solvent that is going to be used on your piece. Let's say in the form of like a lacquer undercoater, you might want to use a lacquer thinner. It just depends on the piece and the need for that, but sometimes for increased adhesion, that's something you could do. I wouldn't do it on plastic, and this is plastic and wood and some laminate, so I'm just going to use some water and Dawn. The thing about this is that you will have to let the primer dry for a little bit longer because it does take longer to adhere to these substrates, but a shellac based primer will adhere to these substrates. So just something to consider. It's going to take a little bit longer to get adhesion that you might be used to with wood, where it just, you spray it and basically immediately it's stuck on there with BIN anyway. So just a food for thought. So I sanded with 220 and then I wiped everything down with a microfiber, making sure to get rid of the dust. The dust with this material was just insane, but I did everything I could to make sure that it was all off and clean, and I tried to sand for a flat surface. And it's easy with just clean straight lines like this. And after that, I got my little Harbor Freight gun hooked up to my turbine. I turned the pressure pretty much all the way up, and I used a 1.3 and some BIN, the regular shellac-based primer, not the synthetic, and I sprayed it, and it came out pretty good. These little Harbor Freight guns with a 1.3 spray great on a turbine sprayer. If you have a Fuji or another sprayer like that, like I do, then it's a good route because when these guns get too out of sorts and they're just clogged up and everything, you can just chunk them and buy another one. But if you clean them, they will last you a while. I put it on pretty thick, but I also let it sit for a lot longer than I typically would. Okay, so now I'm sanding in between my first and second coat of primer, and I'm using a Surf Rep sander with a super fine and a flat pad. So it's just not like a foam pad. I use that for flat surfaces a lot of the time, and I'll use like a foam pad with a little bit more kind of contour for the second sanding. But yeah, I mean, this works good for just sanding flat, and just going to sand the boxes, everything, the drawers. I decided to spray the inside of the drawers on this one because of the fact that I thought that that kind of dark brown stain against a blue color would be really distracting. Second coat of primer here, and I really don't like to go over 2 coats of primer, so I'm going to try to make sure that this is our last one. So I talked in my last video about making this new spray booth, and it's really not much anything special if you want to call it a spray booth, but it's a lot easier to stretch plastic over than the PVC was, and since I work alone, that made it a lot easier for me to do. But as far as the spray booth goes, I've got about 6,000 CFM of suction, which is a little bit small for my area, so I'll probably need to add one more fan. But other than that, I've liked it a lot. It's open on one side. I can show in the video if that's something that you're interested in. Okay, so we're spraying Centurion's top coat. I'm using a 1.8, and I'm using the 400 series in Palladian blue. It's an acrylic, technically a polyurethane. I call these water-based lacquers, though that's just kind of what I'm used to. I'm spraying it with a 1.8 out of my Fuji gravity gun. It kind of just depends on what you want to spray with. I've used a 1.8, 1.3. I find a 1.8 works best. It depends on the weather. You can use a 1.3 in warm weather, but in colder weather like this, it definitely needs to be a 1.8 probably. And I also have to heat the material. And just something to know, Centurion would probably not condone using this top coat over BIN, but in my experiment, it has worked. So it's an acrylic top coat. I don't see any reason why it couldn't go over BIN. But, you know, if you want to use manufacturer specs, then I wouldn't do it. So I'm just sanding in between coats with a Surf Prep Superfine foam pad, and I really just try to sand out all the orange peel and make sure it's a flat surface and really smooth. I'm going to try to make my second coat my last coat, and it was, except for one area that I had to touch up. So sometimes after I finish a video, I'll actually have to go touch up some areas, and that was the case with this one. Honestly, it's pretty much the case with every single piece. So, you know, just something to consider. I try to pretty much catch everything, but sometimes I miss the occasional run or sag that I have to go back and fix later. So for the hardware, I try to use the original hardware when I can. In this case, I like the long kind of bar hardware. Looks modern, and that's what I'm going for. So I'll clean it all with alcohol, and I'm going to use some just regular oil-based spray paint from Home Depot in like a gold color, and just repaint everything. I've never had any problems with this spray paint, and as long as you prep this hardware right, then you should be good. So this is my second coat of the water-based lacquer, the Centurion product, and it's Palladian blue. like before. The only difference is I'm using my Graco cup instead, and I'm using a number 4 needle nozzle set, and I've got the fluid set to about 4, and I'm just trying to use this setup instead, just trying to kind of compare and see which one does better. I think the Graco beats out the Fuji gun a little bit. So just for consideration, I like gravity fed guns, but I like the way that the Graco sprays a little bit better too. So just some information in case you're planning on using this product. So after I finish this up, I'm probably going to let it sit for about 6 to 10 hours, maybe overnight, and I'll put the hardware back in. I'm really careful when I put everything back on because it's still kind of soft and delicate. The paint has not cured yet. These lacquers do cure faster, and you're able to move them after 16 to 24 hours technically, but that's not in all conditions. So just use your better judgment. If it, looks a little soft, if it feels a little wet, then wait some time. Generally speaking, paint kind of cure times and dry times, even the water-based lacquers, can vary widely depending on the conditions and how thick you apply them. So just something to consider. But yeah, I got everything put back on and got the hardware in. And here's the finished set. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe if you want to see more restoration content like this. Thank you.